I want my office to at least know that I am doing as much as I can to safeguard this business that provides those mortgages, and those mortgage payments and the paychecks and the dance classes and everything else to these kids whose parents work for us, with us. It's not political, right? That's just protecting the house. We're not just slinging freight, right? Like that's not the idea here. We want to build relationships, and one of the ways that you build relationships is you're the expert in the room. That's our goal. I think it was like 3 years ago, Marco Rubio just walked by us in the hallway, and I was like, oh, this is kind of wild. You have to be in the room. You have to be in the room having the conversation.
Welcome to Freight Beat, a podcast from the Transportation Intermediaries Association. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Merritt.
Every week, we talk with the people who shape freight, logistics, and how this country moves.
Every rule you operate under, every court decision that changes what you owe, every enforcement gap a fraudster walks through, all of it gets decided by people who mostly don't move freight for a living. Our guest has spent a good chunk of his career making sure those people hear from someone who does. Daniel Ilg is the president of ILG Logistics and an at-large member of TIA's board of directors. Daniel, welcome to Freight Beat.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
So, Daniel, just to hop right in, what would you say are the biggest misconception that brokers have when it comes to what lobbying actually is, how it works?
Biggest misconception is probably that it doesn't matter, or that the one voice isn't going to add a tremendous amount of value into those rooms. I think that for the 6 years that I've been going to this thing now, every story matters, and every story brings things a little closer to home. If you're a broker and you work inside of a certain congressperson's district, there's a care for what your business contributes to that local economy, to those families. And so I think being a voice in the room is more important than anything else. Whether they agree, disagree, whatever it might be, being a voice in the room is the thing that matters when you get into those conversations.
I guess speaking a bit more broadly, right? Like, how do you respond to, say, someone who runs a small brokerage who feels like they don't want to, quote unquote, get involved in politics, like going to Washington or reaching out to their congressperson? Like, how does that impact them, whether positively or negatively, if they just want to take that stance?
Yeah, I mean, I think I use it all the time at work, right? Or at the office. Squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So it's not the sense we're going there and complaining about X, Y, and Z, but it's that we're giving both our representatives and their staff visibility to something that maybe isn't the hot button topic for their piece of legislation that day, that week, that month, that session. And regardless of how small you are, regardless of how big you are, like, again, I'll go back to it, your voice matters. It's the benefit of our democracy, is every voice matters. And so making sure that we get on that side, I think, is big. I think on the side of those who say they don't want to get involved, you're already involved, right? Like, you vote, you do all the things that you're supposed to do. You're running a business. There are people, I remember growing up in this industry. My old man started the company back in 2007, started working for him then. And have continued on. But I remember asking him, like, what the hardest part was of running a brokerage, of running a business. And the one thing that he told me then that has stuck with me for 20 years now almost, is just that there, at that time, there's 4 mortgages that require me to make those right decisions. And in that same way, we're up to more than 4 mortgages in this office now. But being able to think about it in that light, that if I'm not going there and I'm not having the conversations and something happens to our industry, whether that's through legislation or lawsuit, whatever it might be, what we've seen with Montgomery, what we saw in Dallas last month, all of these things, I want my office to at least know that I am doing as much as I can to safeguard this business that provides those mortgages, and those mortgage payments and the paychecks and the dance classes and everything else to these kids whose parents work for us, with us. That's, I think, the biggest push there. I want to be able to go and talk to my customers and tell them that, when they get concerns because they got a LinkedIn ad sent to them or a newsletter sent to them about the decision with Montgomery, that I'm able to go in and have a qualified conversation with that customer about what this looks like and what ILG is doing to try to mitigate it, to have conversations about it, what we've changed, what we're doing differently, whatever it might be. I think those are all things that it's not political, right? That's just protecting the house.
So when it comes to you, your family's been in this for almost 20 years, you said, and your dad was involved. From the jump, was he involved in kind of the advocacy side of things? Or, I mean, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? And you're like, I need to be in DC. I need to be part of this.
Yeah, so he was not involved. So he joined TIA back in, I believe it was 2011. You'll have to fact check me on that. But I believe it was 2011. I went to with him my first conference, Capital Ideas Conference in 2019. So we didn't really get involved with TIA till 8 years after paying membership dues. And I remember I forgot who was on stage, but they said something along the lines of, if you want to get involved, if you want to get more involved with the TIA, find somebody with either a TIA shirt on or a name tag that says TIA on it, and just ask them how you can get more involved. And so from there, I found, as happenstance, Chris Burrows, and how do I get more involved and just have that conversation. He was obviously on the government affairs side, so he pushed me on that. But I also was able to join the Young Executives Committee. I ended up chairing that committee for a few years after that, and then have kind of bounced along the line. But I think what I realized after getting involved in just the Capital Ideas Conference in 2019, and then doing our first, it was a virtual fly-in for 2020. Super low pressure because it was all Zoom meetings, like everything else in the world was that year. It's a low risk task in the sense that, like, the win is so much greater than anything that you're risking in going there, of having that conversation, of hearing what your congressperson is actually thinking on that subject. That I think that was the biggest thing for me, that it opened up that door. It opened up that visibility, to see what was possible if we just sit and have conversations. And I just haven't stopped having them. I think that's been the coolest part, is to go that first time. So my first time virtual, and then 21, 22, 20, on and on and on. But like, I have relationships with some of these staffers now over the last 3 to 5 years. Like, I've met with the same staffer, their same legislative aide, for the transportation and infrastructure, wherever they fall in that place. And so, like, being able to walk back into an office a year later of like, oh, hey, I thought about you this summer. Like, that was a comment that was said last year when we walked in, and I was like, oh, how'd you think of me? He's like, oh, we had some freight, we were moving houses and it got stolen. I go, you should have called me. So there's pieces within this where, our business as freight brokers is relationship based. It's relationships with our customers, it's relationships with our carriers, it's relationships with our vendors, with all these people. So there's no reason why that same approach to relationships shouldn't also apply when we're talking to the people who we've sent out to DC to represent us.
Do you feel like being a part of this has had like a direct effect on your actual business as well? I think we talk about it makes you a good leader. It makes you obviously more involved. You know what's going on. But do you find that when you're staying ahead of the curve, when you are in touch with your representatives, when you are kind of tapped in more like that and more active, do you think that it makes, perhaps your customers more trustworthy, that you can talk shop a little bit more clearly, or has that had an effect in that way?
Yeah, I think it makes a difference in the sense that I'm able to have, I'll call them higher level conversations with C-suites, with customers, or the contact that maybe isn't the one tendering us freight, but it's their, person who's looking at risk. It's their person who's looking at insurance. Being able to talk through that with customers has been really big. Being able to, hear or read the decisions that come down out of, obviously use Montgomery as an example, right? Hear that, read that, and then be able to have the immense amount of resources to actually try to understand it, I think came a lot from the relationships built out in DC, as well as relationships built throughout the TIA. That I think is like the bigger motivator there for me. Those conversations and relationships exist, and they help us move the needle with customers. But to be able to have those high level, we're not just slinging freight, right? Like, that's not the idea here. We want to build relationships, and one of the ways that you build relationships is you're the expert in the room. That's our goal. We want to be a consultant to our customers. We want to help them understand their entire supply chain, where it can get better, where it can get tighter, where we can loosen up, all of these kinds of things. And the only way to do that is by being in the conversation. I mean, I'll say it 1,000 times in this on this podcast, is you have to be in the room. You have to be in the room having the conversation.
So you mentioned obviously being in the room. I got kind of a two-parter actually. First, like obviously you tell someone, "Oh, I went to Washington and met with XYZ," and they probably imagine, it's this very like serious conversation. What's it like though? Like, what's it like to meet a senator, a congressman? And then I guess my second piece of that was, oh, you only got to meet with the legislative aide. How that must have had no impact at all. Is that true? I suppose, or is there value to meeting with the guys who are kind of doing the paperwork in the office?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things I was told to us um, at my first one, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, is just that DC's ran by 20 somethings, right? Like, I mean, the staff in these offices, it's typically younger folks. And so there's really no, I don't want to say there's not a difference there. It's really, really cool when you get to meet with the actual representative. Um, they're a little bit more engaging. They're a little bit more willing to understand the background of the story that you might be telling, of what you're looking for, what legislation you're bringing them. But at that same side, is meeting with the legislative aide does the same thing. They are reporting and having that conversation that I got to have with the representative 3 hours after I had it with them. And so part of that is being a good communicator, or trying to be as best of a communicator as you can, making sure that you're telling the whole story to that aide, so that when it goes and gets relayed back to the representative, that the full story is being told. It was, I've been able to meet with a good amount of my representatives. I was able to I sat and we were able to have conversations for the last 2 years with Senator Duckworth. I think I talked about this previously, but it was one of the cooler opportunities. Just obviously it's senator, so you get to, there's 2 of those in each state, versus representatives, there's a couple more. But when she came in the first time, so 2 years ago, we didn't really have a policy or a legislative agenda, in the sense of like, hey, here's a law we're trying to get pushed through, or something that we would appreciate your support on. And I remember one of the conversations that we were having in that meeting 2 years ago was, her response was, what do you want me to do here? And it was like, well, enforcement of current. She was like, well, bring me something that I can, call it sink my teeth into, for lack of a better phrase. And so the next year we went, and Senator Duckworth came in again, and we had a piece of legislation that we were able to hand her and say, hey, this is what you asked for last year. We brought it. We would love your help with this. And by the time that I got back to the hotel after our meetings for the day, Chris came up to me and was like, hey, I think Senator Duckworth is signing on as a co-sponsor of the bill. And so like, that was very specific. Like that doesn't happen every time, right? But that was a really cool win, to walk away from a whole day of meetings, and hey, like, we accomplished what we set out to do, and that was really a neat opportunity for me personally, and then also I think I had 4 or 5 brand new attendees for the fly-in with me that week, or that day, and so they had got to see democracy in action, right? It was really, really neat.
Is there a way to, so everybody, it's this big jam-packed kind of experience here. Then you go back home to your office, you go back home to where you live. How do you, and you said, a year might have passed between that, but you have this relationship, this kind of fledgling relationship. Are there other ways to nourish that? Talk.
Yeah, I think when I leave every meeting on the Hill, I grab a business card and I leave a business card. I try my best to I treat it not in the same way, but it's almost like sales, right? If I go and visit a potential new customer, I'm door knocking, and I go and I meet the person who is the decision maker, or the person right below the decision maker as far as who gets freight. Before I'm almost back at my office, I've already sent an email, left a voicemail, sent a text if I got the cell number, like all this hey, here's all of my information. Here's why I think we would be a good fit. Here's some of the problems that I saw. Here's how I think we could try solving them. I would love more information on X, Y, and Z. Apply that same tactic when you're having the conversation with your representative and with their office, right? So, I mean, so I have a bag of business cards, and so probably half of those are from my trips to DC. Have them saved. I'm a nerd, so I have pictures and I have a photo album of business cards that I get so that I don't lose them, because I have a habit of doing that. So I've created that process. So being able to follow up with email, follow up with a text message if you're able to get their cell phone number. Be able to just have the conversation, be a resource for them through the year. If something happens in their district, or more people come and are having conversations, and this idea of fraud and double brokering is brought up, or this other, any other of our topics that we're talking about, being able to be that resource to them of, hey, call me, text me. I would love to have the conversation, what it looks like on the ground in my business.
You mentioned obviously huge topics, right? That are the talking points of the brokerage world. You got Montgomery, you got cargo theft, you got rate transparency, things of that nature. I mean, how can you make sure you're having a difference in influencing isn't the right word, obviously. But, how can you help to make sure you are making sure those are being paid attention to by people who can actually make a law? Like, how do you actually make sure that what's happening is you are being listened to, I suppose?
Yeah, you attend policy forum. I think that's a great first step. Shameless plug, but I think that's the great step, right? If you're not being heard, it's because you're not in the room. And you have to be in that room. And so pushing you into that spot, I think, is really helpful. It's not a big ask as far as time commitment goes. I understand the travel that's associated with it, but it has become and will probably forever be. It's my favorite conference that TIA puts on. It's one where I'm not a big conference guy. I don't like going to conferences in the sense of like taking time away from the office to, hey, I'm going to go learn this stuff, which is great. I'm going to bring back information to the office, which is great. But I don't feel productive necessarily in the way that I think most freight brokers would, the way that most freight brokers would assume that word to mean, of being productive. How many loads did I move? How much did it work? Like, what did I do right today? What did I do? That's where I think the policy forum's awesome, is because you're working. Like, it's a full day of being on your feet, office to office. We're used to meetings with our customers or carriers or internal. So you're running meeting to meeting to meeting. The logistics involved in it is kind of wild sometimes, because you're taking underground tunnels from one house building to the other. If you get lucky, you get to take the train across, which is really cool. But I mean, that's some of the pieces where, from a personal side, like, there's how many movies and video or TV shows about DC, and I went in 8th grade and I didn't come back until I was 30 something. To be able to like see some of the stuff, it's like, no, I've been there. I've been in the Rayburn building. I've been in like all of those kinds of things. I think there's just pieces of it that become really cool because it conceptualizes the ideas that you see on screen, or on social media or whatever it might be.
I guess you kind of half answered it, but like, is there any one moment, I guess, like when maybe your first actual in person one or something, you're like, oh man, here I am. Like, was it what maybe you saw a senator walking down the hallway, or you're just on the Capitol step, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think it was like 3 years ago. Marco Rubio just walked by us in the hallway. And I was like, oh, this is kind of wild. Like, I see him on, the news networks and on social media, and he just walks by, says hello. I've had it before with a representative gets in the elevator with us, and I'm looking at him like, I know who you are, but I can't remember the name. So there's some of those times where it's just, it's not that they're celebrity, right? Like, that's not what it is, but just the amount of influence that they have in how our businesses run is immense. And I think that gets lost sometimes on, freight brokerage, right? Like, the biggest fear is that our business is shut down because of what happens out in DC in the sense of legislation and risk. If you're not there having the conversation, you can't go back home to your office and tell them that you did everything you could to save what provides those 30 some mortgages in the building. And that's where I'm unwilling to kind of waver from.
If you could change one thing about the way that in our industry kind of advocates for itself, or maybe doesn't, what would it be? I mean, do you feel like it's the people who come to policy forum are pretty representative of the population, or do you feel like there should be more of a vested interest from folks from smallest brokerages to the largest ones?
Yeah, magic wand question. It's my favorite interview question, so I appreciate you for this. I think on the side of representation, I think that's the cool part about the policy forum. We have folks. So I'm in Illinois, and so Illinois, for freight brokerage, if you didn't know, is a very large and robust state for freight brokerage. And so we have a lot of folks that come out from Illinois. So we end up splitting up into two teams. And It's really neat because it's represented so well in the sense that we typically will have one or two insurance folks with us. We might have a legal and risk person with us from a larger broker. You have myself who runs a mid-size freight brokerage. There's folks that are 5-person team, 6-person team. They're at the head of that 5 or 6-person team, and wherever it might be, Illinois, and they come out. I do think that we have good representation across the spectrum. I think the biggest thing is, when we're doing our introductions to representatives or aides, when we're having those conversations in the office, one of the things that I always bring up is, hey, ILG Logistics, we're based out of Tinley Park, Illinois. I have 35 employees that run under ILG, and going around the room and having other people introduce themselves and their business in that way, and you start to stack up the amount of people that are in our industry, and whether it's a 5-person brokerage or it's a 150-person brokerage, like I'll go back to it. Every voice matters. Like the 5-person brokerage is no less important to the economy or this industry than the 150. And I think that is the piece that is more easily talked about when you're out in DC and in those conversations.
I guess I don't know how to ask this question, but I guess at this point you've met several of your representatives, like I said, and you've met some senators from Illinois. Like, do you tailor your messaging to them at all? I don't know. Since you already have a relationship with them, you're like, hey, how are you? By the way, this is still important to me. Like, what? I just, since you get to maintain relationships as opposed to build new ones, like, how do you continue that conversation when you come back a year later, as opposed to a reintroduction? Like,
Yeah, I mean, part of it, right, is I'm in DC once, twice, 3 times a year. They're in DC whole lot more than I am. And so that conversation was meaningful to me because it was the first time that I was sitting down in that office and having that conversation. That was one of 20 meetings they had that day, 15, 10, 5, whatever it might have been. And so there's a little bit of the reminder piece of, hey, last time we were here, we talked about X, Y, and Z. Those things are still happening. This is what's happening right now. This is what we're seeing in action by whoever it might be. And being able to play that game is, you're going to have to kind of do the reminder game of, hey, this is what we talked about last time, and this is continuing to be the thing we're going to talk about this time. But it's a lot easier to have those conversations than you would think. What we do as freight brokers is sell, right? We're a sales organization. That's at the end of the day, that's selling to customers, that's selling to carriers, that's making sure that we're providing the best customer service on both sides that we're able to. So it's doing that same thing, just sitting in a representative's office doing it.
What is advocacy? So aside from policy forum, aside from, maybe kind of keeping abreast of what's going on, trying to foster those relationships, what is one thing that you think members or brokers in general, would benefit from when it comes to staying in touch with the folks at TIA or with an association, and making sure that you're keeping that relationship? So you might be at home, but your voice is being heard through the people who are working here, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think getting involved with the government affairs team at TIA, whether that is Mitchell or Dan, or Chris to an extent. I mean, I'll throw him under the bus here. He'll love that. But I think on that side, he's getting involved and having conversations with those guys because they're the ones that are having those meetings on a regular basis on the Hill, setting up the meetings for our policy forum, doing all of those things. That makes a huge difference because you get to have those conversations on a regular basis. Joining committees, I think, is huge because that's a big push for all of the committee members and chairs for those committees is, get involved, have those conversations. There's always a staff liaison on all of those committees. So it's an easy place then to build that relationship with somebody on staff and then move that into that spot. The other piece is come to Capital Ideas, go to the conferences, Technovations. Capital Ideas obviously is the main one, but go to those conferences and have the conversations, build the relationships, because those are the things. I mean, when I look at my phone and the amount of contacts that I have, that if I run into an issue here, I know that I have 5 to 8 people that I am able to contact and give them a call in the middle of the day. I'll hear the forklift running behind them. And hey, I just real quick question. This happened. How would you have dealt with it? Or how do you think I could deal with this to, whatever. There's all those pieces on the relationship side that I think is really important. Don't know if that answered any of the question you just
No,
asked.
that was exactly right. Thank you.
So last year I got to go to Policy Forum, and I got to go walk around with the Southern California delegation. And one of your fellow board members, Alicia Bly, I was walking around with her, and she got convinced, I think in the room, honestly, one of her Congress member to do a site visit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've done that before. I'm just kind of curious. Like, what is what is that like? Like, what do you do to kind of when you bring them into the office? Like, what are you showing them? And I think more importantly, what is the impact there? Because like you said, they're in Washington all this time. But like once they actually see boots on the ground, like you said, the 30 mortgages they need paying, the people where they're working, that sort of thing. Just give me a sense like how you make that happen and how you make it.
Yeah. I've invited representatives and senators to my office. We have yet to have one come visit, so I will throw that out there. It is not as easy as seemingly Alicia has made it seem, uh, but I will take some advice from her next time I talk to her. But I know, like as an example, David Abel, who runs AM Transport Services down in Olney, Illinois. We had a meeting with his representative. We've had a meeting with his representative for the last 5 years that I've gone to policy in person. And I believe it was last year, his representative he invited him out every single year in our meetings. Hey, would love to have you in the office. Would love to have you come out. He came out, had those conversations in person, saw the operation. It's pieces like that that brings it home, right? Like, um, I leave here to go to DC. All my folks see is maybe me posting on LinkedIn with the Lincoln Memorial behind me or some photo of me in DC. But that actualizes it for them. And again, I will say it again is the visit from the 5-person freight brokerage team or the 150 freight brokerage team, that happens either way. So you need to be active in asking for it. Most of your all of your representatives have a home office in their district, so it's reaching out to that home office. Hey, the next time that the representative is in state, would love to have you guys out to come and visit our office and say hi. Whatever that conversation looked like. Again, Dan and Mitchell are a great resource for that. They can help set that up, get you in contact if that's something that you want to do outside of Policy Forum. But that's one of the things for me with Policy Forum. I mean, the invite is always out there to any. Would love to have anybody come out to my office and have a conversation, see the conference room, see our people, hear the stories, see the busyness, and really understand kind of what it is that we do on a day in day out basis.
I do think one thing that you're bringing up that is interesting. I mean, if you think about it, the freight brokerage industry is relatively young in comparison to a lot of others. However, this idea of generations kind of taking, the next step and you're passing it off to the next generation. I remember I used to work for an association that represented grocers, and when you become kind of a steward of your community and you have relationships again and again, even if the congressperson might change, even if the senator might change, when you make that first step and commit, I think, to being somebody who they can come to and speak to, I think that those meetings come with time. That's my guess, is that once you've had a few relationships, so it's kind of you can't expect things to change overnight, but perhaps that momentum really can kick off in those relationships in a place like this. Do you think that might be the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true across any relationship, right? You don't move from first date to moved in together in the next week. Like, that's just not how things work. You don't move with a customer of, hey, cold call to I'm moving 300 loads a week for you. That's not how that works. Like, so in that same way, when I talk about relationships, right, there's a build to that. It's the consistency. Are you coming back? Are you sending emails? Are you sending phone calls? Are you having the conversations? And then being willing to do that throughout the year, I think, is really big. But if at nothing else is you go at least one time and you make sure that your voice is heard in that room that one time.
It is funny though. People hear the word advocacy and they think it's this thing you shouldn't. That's like literally advocating for oneself is something we do every single day. When I go to the sandwich shop, I advocate for myself because I want that salami sandwich, not the turkey. So no, that's very interesting. I don't. So Dan, this has been fantastic. I know we could probably talk about this for a couple hours, but you got a lot of work to do. So, anything that you want to add? Just, I mean, anything you've seen, I guess, concretely in your efforts, whether it is coming to Washington or even just grinding at home in Illinois, like the actual real impact of working with your democratic government to make sure things happen in a positive way.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'll point back to, the one thing that I would point back to is just that we see in the news and we see in social media is when people think about freight brokerage, they think of the largest of the large freight broker. And traditionally, this is a very family generational type business. There's a lot of smaller shops and there are the large ones. And so, go out there and be that conversation, that 5-person, 25-person, 55-person freight broker. Go and represent your people well because they deserve it. That's I think the biggest thing is there's a piece of that if you're not doing it, someone else is. It's the old adage of if you want something done right, do it yourself. You have to go out there and be the conversation, like be the voice in the room for the 1000th time today. I'm sorry, but it is so important to me. We talk about it all the time here in the office. Be on the phone, talk to your customers, because if you're not talking to them, someone else is. And so you want to make sure that you're part of that conversation when that issue pops up, that you're their first thought of who to contact when that problem exists inside of their supply chain.
Amazing. Thanks, Daniel. So Daniel Ilg is the president of ILG Logistics and an at-large member of TIA's board of directors. TIA's policy forum runs September 14th through 16th. Registration is open, tianet.org/policy forum. Daniel, if folks have any questions for you or want to connect with you further, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, shoot me an email, dilg@shipilg.com. Very original, but that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Perfect.
That, or you can find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I respond to most of them.
Fantastic. Well, okay. Thanks again for the time. We know you got a busy schedule, so we appreciate coming on to talk about something that's very important. I think when people put enough kind of thought towards. So thanks again, Daniel. Appreciate it. And thank you once again, as always, for listening to Freight Beat for yet another week. Don't forget to like, rate, review, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening or seeing this. And for yet another week, I've been Merritt.
I've been Patrick.
And we will catch you next time.
Thanks so much.